Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to the Future History Project, Isaac Asimov's Future History, and this is the second part of week 3, where we're dealing with two more stories for this week, and they are the first half. There's 4 stories in total, with 2 characters called Powell and Donovan, and these are sort of comical characters, just to a certain extent. I've always loved them. I think they're great stories and great characters, but there is a split between fans that some love them and some hate them. And the first one is called First Law. But Powell and Donovan sort of came about because Asimov based them on 2 characters by that Campbell created by interplanetary explorers Penton and Blake. Even though Campbell never mentioned that. Um, Sorry, I needed something. He never mentioned the fact that he thought they were similar, and Asimov never never mentioned it either. And they ran. There was a series, maybe a half dozen stories from 36 to 38. They're quite fun as well. Um, but anyway, the first and Campbell started a very small section or short story section, and Asimov uh, uh, submitted the first story here called First Law, and it's a spoof. It's funny, and but Campbell rejected it, and it didn't get published till 1956 in Fantastic Universe. Is it? It says in the back here. Yeah, Fantastic Universe in 1956. But um, and yeah, it's got like it's talking about the first law, but it's Donovan, Peter Peter Donovan. He is sorry, I'm trying to hold things here, and I don't. Mike Donovan. He's with buddies, and he's telling a story, and he's saying, "Oh, there's he knows of a story that a robot that didn't follow the laws of robotics," and everybody doesn't believe him. So he starts telling the story of a series of female robots with serial number Ma, and specifically one called Emma. And everybody's, well, I never heard of that before. I never heard of that series. Well, he says, well, no, you wouldn't have, because they discontinued them after this. So they're on Titan. They're getting a base set up, and these 2 characters seem to get the bad jobs. They get stuck doing odd and sort of bad the worst things, like the bottom rung stuff. But they're on this they're on the moon of Titan, and this one robot, Emma, she just keeps going off by herself, and then all of a sudden disappears. And so they're they've got to get this base set up, and they need some other supplies. So he flies out to one, but he wants to get back before some storms hit, but the winds pick up, so he has to land. He sees what he thinks he sees is a storm pup, a creature that's very very vicious. He can only get one shot with it, but then all of a sudden Emma shows up and says, "No, master, don't shoot." And he says, go and attack and get kill it. And she runs, but picks it up and runs away, and leaves him there, in the storm. And he just can't figure it out, but he does make it back to base. But she did not follow the laws of robotics, which are the first laws, and I'll just read them here as Asimov wrote them. A robot may not injure a human being, or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. She left him. And then the second law: a robot must obey the orders given by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. She didn't obey. And then a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. there's amendments to this later on, but we'll get to those when we get to the stories. So, but what turns out, like, Emma does show up after, and the reason why they don't make them anymore was M-A, Ma, that she had an offspring, a little baby robot that they called Emma Jr. So yeah, Campbell did not like it. Asimov in his autobiography says that Campbell just did not generally have the same sense of humor that Asimov had. So yeah, he didn't take it. But he did take the second one, Runaround. Is it Runaround or Runabout? Sorry, Runaround. And this time they are on Mercury, and they're setting up a base there as well. And Mercury's like, they call it the Jinx planet. It's like, it's like a furnace, and they need some strontium. I think it is. I think it's strontium. Um, and they send out a robot because there's pools of it on the surface, and they need to have this for the power supply before the sun comes. It comes on to the base, and they'll be all fried. But this robot just keeps going, circling around this pool, circling the pool, and they can see this on the screens, but they can't contact him. He's not answering. But they got to get out there, and their suits will only last like 20 minutes in the sun, in the environment. So but it was a mining colony before, and they got some old robots there that have been sort of mothballed, and they start them up. They're a bit slow, a bit dumb, in comparison, but they are positronic brains. So, but because on Earth they needed to have humans with them, they wouldn't allow robots by themselves. These robots won't go anywhere unless the humans, and they're set because they're massive, like they're 8 feet tall or 9 feet tall or taller, that they got to get onto their shoulders and ride them, sort of piggyback. Uh, and so they do that, and because it was mining, they find the tunnels, and they get nearby to where the robot is. And what they find out is that there's a conflict between the second and third law, because it says the robot must obey orders given to human beings. So he's doing that, but then there is a danger near the pool with stuff that could destroy his body. So he starts going, and then the third one kicks in. It's conflicting with the second one. Then he goes back, and then he goes back and forth in distance where he's no longer in danger, but then he goes back, and and they do contact him, and he's drunk in a sense because of this back and forth, and he's quoting lines from Gilbert and Sullivan, which is hilarious because, well, Asimov was a huge fan of Gilbert and Sullivan, Sullivan, and it's from the farce Iolanthe, and yeah, and so they figure out everything, and they get everything sorted. But like near the end is good because they introduce Susan Calvin in this, because they're saying, oh, the old lady, he didn't want to go way out to Pluto or wherever it was they were gonna send him out there, but now he's not gonna complain. It'll be nice and cold. So yeah, they're humorous characters, Powell and Donovan, and a lot of there's a split between, I think, fans of Isaac Asimov's robot stories. There's some that I love the Donovan stories, and others don't. They don't like them. They don't like the humor, and I guess they don't have the humor that Asimov had. But they're very colorful. They're very colorful stories. And I liked well, I liked the other one too. It's like, they're sitting around drinking beer, and for the first law, and he's telling this story about a robot, that gives birth to another baby robot. It's a tall tale type story. He's probably bullshitting, and but you never know. It's part of the characters. And then Runaround is kind of neat because they give other information with this. Like we saw with an AL 736 or whatever it is goes astray, that robots on Earth were not, you know were not allowed. They were outlawed, and there was fear of them. So we get this a little bit in the Runaround, where talks about, he gives, it's a bit stilted in the sense, because he gives this explanation of these robots, why they're like that, and why they're a bit slow, because, and also too, it shows, like, just because they're a positronic robot brain, they're not all perfect, they're not all smart. There's the technology that grows, and these ones are 10 years old, so they're not as smart as the current ones of the time. And it's set, I've seen dates for this being set like around 2015. But yeah, having a base on Mercury in 2015, I think we missed that for some reason. I don't remember seeing that on the news. um, but but it seemed like, the turn of the century, it seemed a long ways away in the 40s. That's like, 75 years, and nobody then would be alive. Nobody that was an adult would be alive then, in that time, or unlikely to be, that's for sure. So it seemed like a far-flung future. And this also shows where, especially with Runaround, they go, and it might have been this story specifically, because one time Asimov was having trouble writing a story, and he takes it to Campbell, and Campbell says, "Well, I know your problem. You're starting it too soon. Start it later." And so he's always taking that to heart. That if he's having trouble at the start of the story, he starts it later, and he always figures that if he can start it as late as possible into the action, into everything, and if he needs to, he can tell and dialogue the stuff that happened before, or through flashbacks. And this one is a little chunky in that way, a little bit, because it's like there is a little bit of exposition of explaining things a little bit, but it is within, you know uh you know sensible dialogue. However, he's telling somebody, he's telling his partner, that would probably already know this. There's really no need for that dialogue, but like I say, a willing suspension of disbelief, and go along with the story. And also too, there's a funny little thing there about, they chemistry and stuff. He goes, "Oh, it's just, it's high school chemistry, chemistry class," and Asimov was a chemist. He got his PhD in chemistry. So there's lots of little things that are him in there, and the especially with the Gilbert and Sullivan, the lines and the changing of the lines a little bit, that are kind of interesting, and the choice of what Gilbert and Sullivan. And it's like, well, how the hell did this robot know Gilbert and Sullivan? That's my biggest question. How does this robot know Gilbert and Sullivan? Because he's made to do, tasks. And they even talk about where they turn on the old robots, and they were saying, yeah, they were very master and slave type, but even so, they think that they're a little more enlightened now in treating the robots, but they're still um, this sort of, they're in charge. The humans are in charge. They're the masters. They're the boss. So So yeah, so there's lots of little things that you pick up through here that seed other stories, or that sort of connect to other stories. And this is where these, I think, really fit in well with the future history project, or his future history. Some of the other ones we read, maybe not so much, that sort of stand out a little bit. It's like, but these are on the timeline, I would say, on specific timeline of future history. Some of the others are a little bit over here and over there. They might not really fit within the timeline, story wise, plot wise, but with the technology and how he explains things, they do fit. Even though that the plots and stuff like that might not fit so much, but these do, as well as what follows later, Susan Calvin. And because she's mentioned in here, like at the end, it's just, I just love the ending. It says, "Oh, he didn't want to go out to the cold, to Pluto or whatever it is, but after being on the Jinx planet of Mercury and the heat, he'll take the cold." Anyway, we'll be back next week, with five more stories, and the last two of Powell and Donovan. Then we'll get into Susan Calvin. I will speak just briefly about those tomorrow, just to say what we're going to do next week. Take care, BookTube.